Do you have mother wounds? If so, join Miss Nancy and I as we discuss what mother wounds are, how to identify the signs, and ways she has healed from mother wounds, and how she has now helped many other people to heal from mother wounds. Stay tuned. Welcome everyone to the Faith and Mental Wellness Podcast. We have a very special guest today. Her name is Miss Nancy Lamborn. Miss Nancy Lamborn knows all too well the pain of childhood trauma and dysfunction. Since her life-changing experience with heart-healing prayer in her mid-40s, she has committed her life full-time to leading others into the same level of freedom she enjoys today. Since 2016, Nancy has worked with well over 2,000 clients using biblically based healing prayer methods. As an ordained minister and licensed chaplain, she guides hurting people through a deep exploration of the past and into the supernatural of exchanging lies for truth and bondage for freedom with Christ Jesus. She was born and raised mostly in the Deep South. Nancy and her husband, Rick, now reside in Georgia with their dogs and backyard chickens. I love it. They are also loving parents and immensely proud grandparents. And she is the author of the book, Angry Daughter, A Journey from Hatred to Love. Welcome again, Miss Nancy. Thank you
Thank
for being here.
you. Thank you.
I love your story. Listen, I'm like from the country area too, so
Mhm.
I know all about the chickens, the
Yeah, we
dogs, all
actually
that good stuff.
yesterday, we actually had about a dozen hatch new babies, so I'm so excited we have
Really?
babies,
So
yes.
exciting. Oh
So
my
fun.
God. So without further ado, we're gonna go ahead and get into our topic today, which is about mother wounds. And so, Miss Nancy, can you share with us today what is a mother wound?
So I'd actually never heard of a mother wound, the phrase of it, until maybe 8 years ago, and I can tell you what, someone who doesn't have one, it's a completely foreign concept. Those who say, "Oh, my mom was my best friend and we were so close and she saw me and she knew me and she was attuned to me." So the opposite of that is can be a mother wound. Whether it was that mom was just there but not connected, and she was always dreaming somewhere else and her mind was always elsewhere, and she was present but not present. That can be a mother wound. The physically abusive ones, the screamers, the yellers, the ragers, the ones who are rolling alcoholics. It's any sort of, I'll call it systemic pattern of behavior from our mom that has just left a huge hurt or trauma or wounding on me. It could even also lead to the belief systems. Um, if mom was always, like judging my parents, and well, the boys aren't going to like you if you wear that. And are you really wearing that outside? And these subversive comments about our physical appearance, that can create a big wound and a lie that I'm ugly and that no one's going to want me, and all these different things. So it's some sort of systemic and profound pattern that has left a big hurt in my heart. And that can mean a lot of different things to a lot of different people, but that's what I would label it as.
Oh, you're so right. And it's so broad as well. Like
Yes.
there's no one size fits all. Everyone's story is different.
Yeah.
And so because of that, what are some signs that you've seen over the years that or even in your own experience that you have a mother wound?
Yeah. So I think one of the biggest signs is, how do I feel about going to visit my mom? If I'm dreading every visit, something's there, right? If I see her, she's calling, and I roll my, oh my gosh, it's my mom. If that's my pattern, there's a wound there somewhere, right? Um, Somewhere it's obvious. I've estranged and she cut me off, or I cut her off years ago, and I haven't even seen her in years. And she could even maybe have passed away and I wouldn't even know it. Some it's obvious, but how does my heart feel when I think about going to see her. And if any of it goes, chances are good I've got a wound somewhere.
That's so good, Miss Nancy. I've also seen too, in the past where as daughters, sometimes we can, even sons, when it comes to our mother, we can be very protective.
Mm-hmm.
And so I noticed that when I would ask certain people about their mother relationship, they will like minimize it.
Oh yeah.
And then as time go on, things start coming out about what mom did or what mom didn't do. And I'm like, oh my God, like you have a lot of mother wounds, but they want to keep it
Yeah.
hush hush because they want to protect their
Yes.
parent. So I've seen
And
that
you
too.
know, that's a learned behavior,
Mhm.
especially if the child believes at a young age that, well, I'm responsible for mom's happiness because, well, you make me so angry and you make me feel so blah, blah, blah. I'm 7. How can I make you feel anything? And so if I've picked up false responsibility and in my family of origin, there's a whole like, we don't talk about what happens outside this house. We don't bring other people into our stuff. Like, I can understand how some women will be protective. And in the religious community, the faith based community, there can be some religious controls like, well, you're not honoring your mother if you tell people what she did. That's actually not biblical. It's not. Um, we have to learn how to speak the truth in love, right? And so sometimes it takes some unraveling of that, of, well, if I tell the truth, like, I feel so guilty that I'm really sharing what my mom did. Um, but that's all within me, right? This is a deception that the enemy is like, no, people are going to judge you if you tell the truth, but that's actually not the case. There is only freedom that comes from truth, right? No, not everything's going to be revealed. The scriptures say that all things that are done in secret will be revealed. And so I can let the Lord walk me through that, like feeling and that guilt and whatnot, knowing the guilt is never of the Lord.
Oh, that's so good. So I have 2 points I want to say. I have one question and one statement. So I remember in scripture it says that, parents do not exasperate your children.
Yes.
And in the scripture before that it says, honor thy mother and thy father, but also it's a commandment for the parents as well. And
Yes.
so I know I had to tell a lot of clients that in the past, even some of my other family members about it, and they're shocked. They're like, oh my God, like all
Yeah.
my life I've been told to honor my mother and my father, right?
You know what's also
So
fascinating? This might blow your mind. When the Ten Commandments were written, in the Hebrew culture, back in Moses' day, if you didn't plant your own wheat, you die, right? You have to go plant your food, and that's how you live, is you live off of what you plant or catch fish or whatever. And so as parents got older and they can physically no longer take care of themselves, the culture was just allowing them to starve to death. And the law was written like, no, no, don't let your parents die. So in the Hebrew culture, honoring your mother and father in the Ten Commandments meant to provide for them in their old age so they don't starve to death. We have attached this psychological, emotional chain to that scripture, and it was never meant to be there in Hebrew culture. It just wasn't.
I've never heard that before. Thanks for letting me know that. And that goes back to understanding the times that the scripture was
Yes.
written in as well.
Yes, it wasn't written for the 21st century American. It was not. Yeah.
Yes, I love it. So, with that being said, to the person who is struggling to even verbalize that they have like this pain from their mother, what would you say to them?
Yeah. So the first thing is find a community or a therapist or a minister that's safe to be completely brutally honest with. Talk therapy. I'm finally, for the first time, talking about how my mom's words about me made me feel. Just being willing to be truthful and transparent about it. That's a huge step for a lot of people. And I need it to be a place. I'm not going to talk to my aunt or my grandma or my sister. No, no. I need to have a completely neutral third party who has the skills and the training and the expertise to help me walk through feelings, because I may not even know, anger is a mask for everything. So I may be really angry about all that happened, But when I talk through it, someone else can recognize, you were actually terrified. And anger is a really good cover for fear, right? Or shame. You were felt such shame about what happened, but anger is a good, anger makes me bigger and makes me stronger than you and more powerful than you. And so having a person who is safe, who can help you unravel the emotions that we've knotted up and shoved down and, covered under cement block down in our gut is a really good first step to getting unstuck. Um, for some people, if things are super toxic, like they're cussing at me over text message every day, and I go over and the first thing I hear was, well, you're good for nothing. And like, if I'm getting verbally assaulted like that on a very regular basis, I can't heal from that unless I separate from it. And so for a season, I may need to set a boundary of, unfortunately, limiting my visits and, not reading texts when they come in. I give my husband my phone and have him make sure no one's like in a ditch or in the hospital, but delete everything else that's dishonoring, because I have to be able to separate from all of the existing toxicity and trauma so I can heal from it. The book Boundaries by Henry Cloud, life-changing, super powerful. But that also might be necessary if there's still a whole lot of like toxicity. That wasn't necessarily the case for me as much. I did begin to recognize, like, oh, she's spiraling now. Oh, look, I have to go. I would learn how to be scarce when I needed to be scarce, right? So I didn't get sucked in. That took practice, right? But if somebody else is like, all right, I know that every time I see her, I roll my eyes. Just start somewhere with somebody who can help me unpack what it is I'm feeling, name what I'm feeling, and then start to go down that rabbit hole of, okay, well, how long have I been feeling this way and where did it start?
I love that what you said. Like, pretty much like getting to the root of why you feel that way now.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right. Kind of like working backwards to see when it began. I think that's so important because I know that setting boundaries with parents is a very delicate and hard for a lot of people
Yeah, it
because they
is.
have that guilt that come up and that shame that comes up with it. And of course, parents who are like this are really good at manipulation.
Oh, they're great. And
And
they're
they're
a tandem, right? The husband
hmm
will be like, why are you disrespecting your mother? Like, he's part of the problem.
yes,
And
yes.
so it hurts, but having a grounded voice who can walk me through that and talk me off the ledge and encourage me that I'm doing the right thing, that's critical. It's critical.
And I even go a little bit further to say that I've also noticed that, like, what you just said was, okay, what you go through with your parent, but if you like have a partner who hasn't had that experience, it's very difficult for them to really understand.
Absolutely.
It is. I've had to in the past kind of like give them information and give to their significant other.
Yep.
They can really understand why you're feeling this way, why you need boundaries, why you're not overreacting because they didn't live it. And sometimes
That's
this
right.
too, the parent can show the other partner a whole different side of themselves.
Well, they often do. It's the
Yes.
gaslighting, and when it's one on one with you, they're the hard person. But then, oh, they're all peaches and cream when your spouse comes around. Like, that's learned behavior. Yeah.
Are you a Christ centered therapist, a life coach, a leader, author, podcaster, in ministry, an entrepreneur, or someone who has a passion to empower others through writing? If so, I have a special announcement to share with you. So, I have a new platform called Empowered Thought Leaders. It is an extension of Empowered Purpose Academy, which was founded in 2021. In 2022, we founded the Empowered Purpose Academy blog, and we have a very strong domain authority, meaning that as we publish blogs, they're found on Google easily. So if you're looking to expand your reach, if you're looking to reach a broader audience, then check out Empowered Thought Leaders. I will put the link for you in the description box for you to read all the information about it and to learn more about how you can sign up. Talk to you soon. So So good, Miss Nancy. So good. So, how does having mother wounds affect other relationships with other people in your life?
Yeah, so for me, it really created this foundation of resentment and bitterness and anger, and just all the time I woke up offended. I went to bed offended. I never connected my partnership with anger, with the world and with life, as being related to my mom. I just, well, look at what they did and how dare they do that, and I'm so much better. Like, I was really haughty and snooty about all of this, very proudly holding on to this anger because it makes me bigger than you and more powerful than you. um and so for me, it definitely affected other relationships because I was snippy and judgy and critical, and I what no one was safe to be friends with me because I'm not going to put up with you if you're, if I'm judging you as less than. Like, I'm so much better than all these people. I didn't have any close friends. None. I didn't. Um, and so it permeated my entire life. And I didn't know how much until it was suddenly and radically gone. Like, whoa, what is this? This is peace. I've never felt this before. This is a little strange and shocking. And it fundamentally changed who I was. Once I laid it all down, it literally, I mean, my mouth changed overnight. I mean, how I saw other people changed overnight. It was unexpected and it was profound.
And what you're saying is that you are projecting what your mother was doing to you
Yep.
onto other people because you
Bingo.
couldn't confront what she was
Yep.
doing to you.
Bingo.
It's a ripple effect, and it
Oh,
is for
yeah.
sure. And you're more critical, like especially I know I've seen that. If a parent is critical towards you, then you'll be critical towards other people.
Oh, yeah. They
That
call it destructive
perfectionism.
family patterns. We learn this. Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Okay, so can you share three insights or more, if you would like, about your book and also your own experience? Which her book, you guys, is about her own experience, but also it can help you as well, right? Correct. That you want to share with the audience that can benefit them on their journey to healing from mother wounds.
Yeah. So the first thing is, the book is topical and it's
Okay.
not chronological. And so there's a chapter on shame and fear and guilt and anger.
Mm-hmm.
And as I was writing all of this out, I needed to add more, just needed word count. And it was like, what do I add, Lord? And so the Lord had me add a prayer at the end of every chapter
Mm-hmm.
that the reader can pray along with, like if
Yes.
they have dealt with that.
Yes.
And I've gotten so much feedback about those. Like,
Yes.
wow, I'd never realized that I needed to let this go. And my mom's been dead for 10 years, but here I am weeping because I'm finally letting go of the one thing that she used to say to me, right? And it's a very, very short, very simple, but it's pretty profound. Um, the other thing with the book, my mom did pass away a couple years ago. And so for people who have lost a parent and it wasn't a sweet, loving, all wonderful relationship, that kind of grief is different. I'm not grieving the sweet, loving, close, intimate relationship that we had. That's not my narrative. And so as I have begun walking through that, actually the book itself was part of that journey. Being able to write the stuff down helped me in the grieving process. Um, there's a whole chapter on grief. Our family never grieved well. If you were weeping at a funeral, you were considered hysterical, and so something was wrong with you. And so, your mom passes away, and I was with her in her death, and it was horrible. Um, but so writing all of this after the fact was very cathartic, very healing. I wept many times as I was writing it and as I was reading it again. And I needed to, right? Because grief is a journey and grief is a process. And it was like, oh, okay, these are tears. All right, like this is good. I'm allowing my tears to come. Tears are healthy. I'm supposed to be feeling this way. And so for anybody whose parent is either, they've lost them to dementia, or they've lost them to estrangement, or they've lost them to death. This is hearing someone else's story about how they got through that and how they walked through it and where the Lord was in it ultimately. I hope that will speak to some people for sure. And then the biggest thing in the back of the book is this whole section called the empty chair exercise. And this was what profoundly changed me was you imagine that your offender is sitting right in front of you. And whether they're deceased or not doesn't matter. But you imagine that they're sitting in front of you, and then you speak as if they are sitting right there. And you've made a list of all the offenses. You know, she left me at the football game and I'd walk home and I was embarrassed. And she blamed me for what Uncle so and so did. And I felt powerless and dishonored. And she called me a name in front of the family and I felt shamed, right? We're naming the offense, but we're naming the emotion. So I've got this whole list down of all these things. And then through the empty chair exercise, you imagine them sitting there and you say out loud, Mom, I choose to forgive you for forgetting me at the football game and for how embarrassing that was. Mom, I choose to forgive you for blaming me for what Uncle so and so did and how dishonoring that was to me. Hearing yourself say that out loud is profound. It is life changing because I'm needing to hear, you know, they may not be there in the real person, but my saying it, there's just this release that comes that is super powerful. It can be very emotional, but it needs to be, right? Because we've shoved all this stuff down and the pain and the hurt and the wounding and just we've shoved it down. And by imagining them sitting in front of you and speaking it out, all of that stuff comes up out of the dungeon like it needs to. And then the process is also releasing it to the Lord, like, God, I don't want this injustice anymore. Take my shame, take my anger. I'm tired of sitting in it. Take the bitterness. I don't want it. And so that is, I find it a life skill, you know, actually, because people are still going to need forgiven for other things next week, next month, next year. The banker and my cousin and my husband and my kids. And learning how to make this kind of forgiveness a lifestyle, radically, profoundly healing. It's so powerful because I walk in peace every day. Is the world perfect every day? No. But having this as a skill, like I'm not offended. What? The person who lived in offense, I'm not offended. It's powerful.
Oh, that's so good. Oh God. So I love that technique, the empty chair, because I know they use it a lot too with Alcohol Anonymous and different, people who have
Yeah.
experienced addictions, but it can be used for so
Oh,
many different
absolutely.
things. Oh my
Yes.
goodness. So
Yes.
yeah. So have you witnessed doing that with clients before they come and you guys
Oh
do it?
yeah.
Oh,
It's part of every session.
powerful.
And
Ah,
it's powerful
yes.
because especially like for the one you said that protects their mom, right? And to finally be able to admit, Mom, I forgive you for how you fixed my hair all through elementary school and how embarrassing that was for me and how much you didn't care that people laughed at me. Like, I may have someone sob for 3 or 4 minutes when they have finally been able to say what their 8-year-old heart felt and what their 10-year-old heart felt. I mean, it's so freeing. Yeah.
It is. And when you have whenever I mentioned it earlier, probably about 3 years ago, I had this client and I was working with her and I always try to pray before I see every client, whether I'm in my private time or we pray together, wherever they prefer. And so I remember I was like doing some trauma work, but it just wasn't clicking. I'm like, Lord, what is something that's missing here? Right.
Yeah.
And we were working on a trauma from something that happened with her, I think a friend or whatever, or her best friend. It was something very similar to that. And then I heard the Holy Spirit in that moment say, "You're working on the wrong trauma. Work on her mom trauma."
Yep.
And I said, the Lord said that this is the wrong trauma. And I told her this is your mom trauma. And she was in shock and she began to cry because she did not want to out her mom. That's
Yep.
the word that she
Yep.
used.
Denial
And
is not a fruit of the
yes,
spirit.
it's not. And what had happened with her mama was a escort. And so her mom had all these different men come in and
Oh,
out her
oh,
house,
that's
in and out her
heartbreaking.
house. And
Oh,
so everybody at school knew, all her
oh
friends
no.
knew. So she would go to school, she would get teased for it.
And it also
Um,
changes your perception of what healthy love and
yeah,
affection is
yes.
and what relationship and commitment is. Like
Mm-hmm.
significant legs on that kind of trauma.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So yeah, it was the wrong trauma, but that mom trauma is a very real thing. It really is. And then you also mentioned, I like what you said earlier about the two different types of grief. Like you're grieving while they're alive because you grieve what you didn't have, but then when they die, depending on the relationship, and if you guys were able to resolve anything, you grieving that again because they're not here.
Absolutely. And
Right?
grieving what wasn't. We have to grieve what wasn't. We
Mm-hmm.
didn't have that close, sweet
Mm-hmm.
friendship, insider secret, like didn't
Yeah.
have that. And so
Yeah.
we have to learn how to not only grieve their loss, but grieve what wasn't and what
Mm-hmm.
won't be.
Mm-hmm.
That's part of what we have to look at.
Yeah. So were you and your mother able to find some resolve before she passed away a couple of years ago?
Actually, no, we never had that conversation. Um, I came to immense freedom with her because the Lord just allowed me to see her through his eyes, recognize that she was a stuck 15-year-old emotionally. And I like, oh, okay, well, this is what I have. Like, oh, well, of course she behaves this way. And it allowed distance, right? I wasn't like, oh, it's actually nothing about me. Her being annoyed with me today has nothing to do with me. This is her. And I learned how to go like, oh, wait, no, that's her stuff. I'm not going to receive her stuff. And I can choose to love her where she is, despite her never changing. I became her caregiver for a season, during which we discovered that she actually was a closet alcoholic. Shocker. And we detoxed and all that. And when she got sober, against her will, but she did get sober, she actually did mellow a little bit. The hard, harsh, hard to please person like calmed down a little bit. And so we had a real sweet, like I'll call it 3 months, where it was just easy to have a conversation. She wasn't as critical and she wasn't as dramatic and all those things. And then she passed away. So never needed, because I had dealt with it with the Lord and the empty chair exercise, I didn't need to have this face to face with her and say, Mom, you realize how much you hurt me and blah, blah, blah. Some people feel like they need that in order to get free, but we don't. I'm living proof that we don't, because I dealt with the Lord and the empty chair exercise, and I got out all my emotions. And that was about me. It wasn't about her. Forgiveness isn't for me. It isn't for them, it's for me. Forgiveness is between me and the Lord. It's me cutting all of my strings and trauma bonds and all those other things that have me stuck, right? It's not about them. So we didn't have that big reconciliatory conversation, but I just was able to walk in such freedom that when she finally, she's in the hospital and we know like this is the end, all of that was gone. All that past was gone. And all I was like, you know what? Yes, well done, faithful servant. Like, I bless my mom and I can remember what was good and I can talk about all of the honorable things and the legacy she left in certain areas. And that's all that came to mind. It's not like I was having to shove down, well, if these people really knew what mom, like I had dealt with all that already. And so by the time she did pass away and it comes to her memorial service, like I'm being totally honest when like, no, I was proud. And that was a supernatural transformation I could not have manufactured on my own.
Oh my God, I relate to your story so much. The only thing difference for me is that my mom died when I was 11 years old in
Oh,
a tragic
huge
house
trauma,
fire.
huge
It was
trauma.
it was like trauma after trauma, and in the household with her, I'm the oldest of four, and she was addicted to alcohol, so she had addiction, domestic violence in the home, dating men who were abusive. We were abused emotionally, mentally, and so much more.
Yeah.
And so, fast forward after she died, I didn't understand. I know that I had mother wounds myself.
Oh yeah.
I did not until, cause I would encounter different women that I were like in like relationship with, and they
Mm-hmm.
kept hurting me. And I kept saying, God, I don't understand. Like, why do they keep hurting me? He was like, because you have mother wounds. You're searching for something
Yep.
that you didn't have in them. And your heart is pure, but their motives are not pure. And so when they see that vulnerability that you have,
Uh-huh. Oh
they
yeah.
latch onto that and try to use you. And I'm
Yep.
like, oh my God. And so
Yeah.
then I said, Lord, can you please heal me? And that same night, I never forget it. Oh my gosh, I had a dream that I was in a group therapy session with my old professor from grad school. She was a therapist too, as well. She did family therapy. And so I was in the group and I was like, kind of like the empty chair technique, what you just mentioned. And I was doing that in my dream. And when I woke up, I kept saying, my God, I'm like, my heart felt different.
Oh
And I
no,
felt
yes.
light. And I said, oh my God, you heal me. And like I cried that whole entire day.
I
I
bet you
cried
did.
all day because like you said, we never heard sorry. We never heard, any of those things.
Yeah.
And so it took God to do that supernaturally, but you have to allow him to,
Yes. You have to.
right? You have to
Yes.
relinquish the power, relinquish your
Oh,
right,
good. He's a
right?
good God.
He is.
Good God. And he knows what we need, especially when we can't do it for ourselves. You couldn't
Yes.
have manufactured that yourself.
Yes. Yes. I'm pretty sure there are lots of people out here who are waiting for the apology for them to actually
Oh yeah.
forgive.
No, no, it isn't contingent on that. And
Ah,
when we recognize, like when the Lord showed me, like your mom is stuck at 15 emotionally, I'm like, I laid down all expectation of an apology because 15-year-olds aren't going to apologize for bad behavior. They're not. They're naturally narcissistic. They don't want to have kids. They don't want to be doing laundry. They don't want to be cooking a meal. They want to go play. Right? This was my mom. And so I laid down the need to have that apology because I knew it literally wasn't there. And we could talk about expectations. Like you don't get mad at a blind person because they can't tell you if your tie and your pants match. And so if I look at my mom and go like, I can't expect an apology from her because she's so broken and has no interest in fixing that. Like it is what it is. And I'm the one now that gets to make a decision. And I can be completely free of it without ever hearing a genuine apology. I can.
so you mentioned something earlier that your mom had a closet addiction. Did she have any other things going on that you were not aware of that caused her to be this way towards you?
Well, we didn't recognize growing up that she was stuck at 15 emotionally, which is why
Yeah.
she hated being around her kids and hated
Mhm.
laundry and hated like it made sense later.
Mhm.
Um, she openly misrepresented her alcohol use. She'd been a smoker her whole life, and then she got COPD, so she had to quit that.
Yeah.
Um, but as far as other things that she kept hidden, she was labeled the black sheep,
Mhm.
and she misrepresented much of her wild years, let's put it that way. She never confessed to what probably was um, wildness and rebellion. And because she painted herself to be the perfect, Christian little girl. And I think there's a whole lot of other stories that never got told about who she really was. And that actually led to extreme self hatred. She hated herself. And she carried such guilt and shame about her behavior that it was hard for her to ever accept grace. I mean, we're at church every time the doors are open. And religion is all about performance and how good you look in the front of the church and singing the right hymn and paying your tithe and all the works, right? And she never really got to know this Jesus that would meet me in a dream and heal part of me because she was so ashamed of herself. She knows now, like she's free now, but she never did get that. And that's sad because it was all about religion and performance. And again, that's what she was taught.
Ooh, I feel Holy Spirit so heavily right now on what you just said. So that lets me know that it's going to help someone because
Yeah.
it kind of goes back to I think about people who are in leadership, those who are in ministry, right? Like all the works, but deep down inside, you're suffering in silence because of past
Yeah.
things you've been through. And so your mom had what they call arrested development. Do you know if her mother had any, of the mistreated her, or are you aware of any of that history?
The history I know is that there was just hard stoicism, harshness, and a lot of extreme critical judgment and criticism. There's a lot of pride in the family. I'm a direct descendant of Miles Standish, who came over on the Mayflower and founded the city of Boston. So
Wow.
you talk about prestige, right? And so the
Mhm.
whole family comes from all this prestige. Well, what's that? Haughtiness, pride, arrogant, criticism, judgment. But there was also just a lot of coldness.
Mhm.
Um, that grandmother was never huggy, lovey, kissy. It was always, she was always scowling at us and correcting our grammar. Like there wasn't a lot of love. There's just not a lot of love. And my mom was very playful, but her mother was not. And so she'd be shamed for that. And, you know, like her real identity was just never validated. So there's invalidation was definitely generational. And then mom doesn't know how to validate her children. And now she's jealous of them because they can do things she can't, you know, and it's like, it's a recipe for disaster. Um, I'm sure if I dug, there'd be a whole lot more. They were very prim and proper and like, you know, everybody's frowning in their photos. Just not a lot of tenderness and love. And it's just sad.
Yes, I can definitely understand exactly what you're saying. So did your mother and your children ever get to meet and have some kind of like
Oh yeah,
relationship with each
she was
other?
Nana, and to when she was in a good mood, she loved being around them as very little babies. Her favorite was before they could walk, and she'd rock them and love
Mm,
them and kiss them and hug them. She was very physically affectionate with little
yeah.
babies, but then as they got bigger, she would snap at them and be a little more irritated. So it
Mm,
wasn't as fun. But no, they knew her as Nana, and
yeah.
they probably saw more alcohol than the rest of us did, you know, as they got to be teenagers. It's like, and they're like, oh, she's had a few, you know, um,
Mm,
because, you know, my children, my oldest is 34 and she only died, my mom only died 2 years ago. So they had their Nana in their life. I had kids young. I was only 21 when my first was born. So Nana was in her life a lot. Um, but they weren't seeing her every single day. And so they were shielded from like some of the stuff written in the book, like they had no clue that kind of stuff happened because they didn't
wow.
see a lot of it.
Mhm.
Um, they knew that she was quirky, and I think they picked up on things that I wouldn't have picked up on, especially with the alcohol. And like, yeah, she was probably lit at this particular event that I just passed it off as quirkiness. They're like, no, she'd had a few. Um, but they do have fond memories of her. Um, they were sad when she passed away. And so they were shielded from a lot. They were. They were.
Mm. Well, good job, Mom. I'm glad you were able to do that and able to pick up on that stuff sooner than later.
Yep.
Yeah. So, have your children read your book? Have they read your book?
They're in the process.
Okay.
You know, I didn't heal until they were already almost out of the house. So they paid the
Wow.
consequences. Like there's a
Yeah.
lot of seasons where I was not a healthy mom. Like they got their own mother
Yeah.
wounds from
Yes.
my stuff, right?
Yes.
Um,
Yes. I can see that.
yeah,
Yes.
and so
Mm-hmm.
they're but they know I'm a different person now than I was
Mm-hmm.
10 years ago. I used to be high
Mm-hmm.
strung and irritated all the time, and they'd be like, "Mom, calm down," you know.
Mm-hmm.
And so they've got their own stuff to deal with. But they're reading it now and they're sharing it with their friends. And so yeah, it's been, you know, it's a little vulnerable because there's like stuff I put in there that like I don't know if I want my kids to know that, but it is what it is. So if it can bring
They
freedom to
should
somebody,
know.
it's fine. Yeah.
Yes, I'm a big advocate of being honest with our
Yeah,
children.
absolutely.
And I have two daughters. They're young, one's a teenager, the other one is about to turn 9. And I share with them everything about my past in a
Yeah.
way they can understand.
Yeah. And you know, one thing
Yes.
I think they recognize is I had every opportunity for this book to be vindictive in nature. And
Yes, but
like,
God
and,
wouldn't
you
let
know,
it.
right, right. But a friend actually, she actually endorsed the book. She said this book is a love letter to your mom. I'm like, oh, it is. Like it is. There's ugly parts, but all of it shows redemption. And all of it shows how I
Mhm,
healed from it, and that
mhm,
it ends with honor. And
mhm,
so it is. It's not vindictive. It's not
mhm,
telling for telling's sake about what an awful
mhm,
person she was and look what it did to me. It's no, look what Jesus did as
mhm.
a result of my giving it to him.
Yeah, that's I'm glad because I definitely know a couple of counselors on Instagram who have a lot of mom trauma,
Oh my
and you
gosh,
can
I
tell
know.
they have not healed, and
Oh
they are
no, they have not.
projecting how they handle stuff in a toxic way to others.
Yeah, it's like,
And I'm like,
oh
Lord, so
no,
I'm
you need
praying.
to let that go.
Yeah, so I pray for him, Lord, please help her to let it
Yeah,
go because it is really affecting how she, counsel other people,
yeah,
and it
yeah.
can. So thank God for your book.
Well, thank you.
Yeah, I trust me, I understand. Like I remember one time my youngest daughter, oldest when she was small, and she used to whine all the time, and it used to irk my nerve. And one day I was driving and I said, God, what is wrong with her? And the Lord said, what's wrong with you?
Amen. Bingo.
I said, what you mean? What's wrong with me? He was like, you are projected onto her what your mom did to you
Yep. Yep.
when you were younger, when you were whine or needed something, she would
Uh-huh.
tell you to be quiet
Yep.
or she would ignore
Bingo.
you.
Bingo.
And so he was letting me know you're triggered. And
Yes.
so because you never got that, it's hard for you to give it to her. And so I was just
I'm
crying. Oh
irked.
my
I'm the
God,
one
I'm
that's
so
the problem.
sorry.
If
Yes,
I'm irked by a 9-year-old or a 12-year-old or a 6-year-old,
yes.
it's not them, it's me.
Yes, yes, yes. So thank God for you being able to break the cycle. That's what
Yeah.
I would say. You broke
Yeah.
the cycle. Mm-hmm. And I'm sure it was not easy. I know it wasn't easy.
No,
No.
it's painful, but it's not like
Mm-hmm.
I've spent seasons in like wallowing in
Mm-hmm.
pain. The pain portion is actually very small compared to the piece that comes
Mm-hmm.
after it, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And
Absolutely.
now that I have grandchildren, like they're getting a totally different me than my children got, right? And
Yes.
like I'm just so hyper aware and like
Yeah.
that thing that irked me when my kids were 6 and 4 and 7, like it's not, it doesn't do that now. And they're like,
Mm-hmm.
oh, I'd rather be with you. You don't yell at me or whatever,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Absolutely. So yes, I love it. So so before we end, is there
Yeah.
anything else that you want to share on your heart? Like I gotta get this out.
Yeah. So just the person that's feeling either triggered by what we've talked about or
Mm-hmm.
like, well, you don't know how bad it was or whatever. I would encourage you to, first of all, consider that there is a different lifestyle. I never considered that there was any other lifestyle other than just my offense and anger and everything. And if you don't know how to get that, just take a step towards a good Christian family therapist, a minister, not your uncle, not your sister, somebody who's a, totally neutral third party, but who's got skills and tools to help us start talking about it. Like you used the example, like this is a mom wound, and she'd never opened up about all that stuff that happened with her mom. We've got to start getting it out, right? If I'm a victim of gun violence and there's a bullet in my leg, I'm going to get it out. If I do not, what happens? It's going to fester, and then my leg is going to get gangrene and infected, and it'll eventually kill me. And I have to treat all these woundings just like that. That right now it's festering because it's screaming, hello, we're here, our wounds are here. Like, you've got to treat this. But also I would encourage people that feels like, ooh, this is too much of a band-aid to rip off at one time. Start little, start somewhere, start with something small. If the mother wound is this massive, scary thing, like learn this kind of a technique on something simple, like something that your cousin did 2 weeks ago. Well, that embarrassed me at the family reunion. All right, let's use that as our example. Go through that empty chair exercise. Julie, I forgive you for what you said in front of the family and how everyone laughed and how that was embarrassing for me. And I released that to Jesus. Like, and then see how you are the next time you see Julie. Oh, well, things are pretty cool now. Start experiencing it in some way. Start with something. And then you can start taking the baby steps towards the bigger stuff. It's not a sprint, it's a marathon, it's a process. And so, I've had years to work through my stuff. From the first day I had my first prayer session with my mentor, until I would say I was really like really walking total freedom. We're probably talking 2 or 3 years of different sessions and therapies and my breaking things down and like, oh, I forgot all about this one trauma when I was 7. Like, I haven't thought about that in years, despite all the forgiving, right? And the Lord brings things up as I'm ready to remember them. And so just giving yourself time, like, there's not a right timeline or a wrong timeline. This just start somewhere and just keep moving. Baby steps if necessary.
I love that. Baby steps, you guys.
Yeah.
And those wounds are festering and you got to kill them from the inside out. I love it.
Absolutely.
You mentioned this too. I like what you said. You said, do not compare your story to other people because
Mm-hmm.
people might say, you don't know what I've been through. Well, it's like a competition. Your experience is not invalidated because someone's story might sound a little bit worse than yours, or yours sound worse than their story. It's not a competition.
Mm-hmm.
Everybody responds to what they've been through differently than somebody else would. So I
Right.
hate doing that. I
Right.
tell people, it ain't about them. It's
No,
about you and how it
exactly.
affected you.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. And so I wanted to show the
Awesome.
cover. Here's the cover of
Yay.
the book, Angry
I love it.
Daughter. So it's
I love
available
it.
on Amazon, both in paperback and Kindle. And then it's also on Google Play as a Google ebook. Um, so yeah, hopefully people will check it out. And
Absolutely. And I'll be sure to
oh, and I
put
want to
links.
share one more thing too. I'm making a study out of this book. I'm turning it into a women's study, and I'm breaking down the chapters topically. And so it's going to be a 7-week study, where all you have to do is get the book, and then I'm making a workbook that goes with it. And the workbook is called Angry No More. And we're going to get on a Zoom call together, and we're going to talk about this stuff. And people can,
Yeah.
like, oh, this, I don't know how to go through it by myself. All right, we're going to do it as a group. So I'm hoping to
Right.
have that out into the public, like within the next maybe 6 to 8 weeks or so. And so if they check on my Facebook page, Lamborn Author is my Facebook page, it'll be advertised on there for sure.
Awesome. I was going to ask you about your social media as well.
Yeah.
So you're on Facebook, you're on
Yeah. Facebook,
Instagram.
Instagram, and Twitter, all as Lamborn Author. So it's
Okay.
all at Lamborn Author, all three.
Lamborn. Okay,
Mm-hmm.
Lamborn author. Okay.
Yeah.
And I'll be sure to put the links as well in the description box so
Okay.
everyone will be able to find that. That's going to be amazing. Congratulations.
Thank you. I'm
Oh,
excited about the study.
yeah. It's
Let
going to
people,
give you so
we got
much
to talk about
life.
it.
It's going to
Yeah.
give you so much joy to be
Yeah.
able to help other women walk through this.
Absolutely. That's
Mm-hmm.
beautiful.
Mm-hmm. Well, Ms. Nancy, thank you so much for your time and for joining me on this evening to share your story. It's so
Thanks for having me.
powerful and so beautiful. And I know that it's going to bless a lot of people. So thank you
Amen.
again for being here. And prayerfully in the future, you never know, we might be able to come together again.
Yeah. I hope so. That'd be great. That'd be great. Thanks
Yes,
for having me. It's been a pleasure.
you're welcome. Thank you again for being a part of the Faith and Mental Wellness podcast community. Don't forget to visit www.faithandmentalwellness.fave to learn more about our directory, our virtual meetups that we have bi-monthly for healthcare professionals, and to also learn more about our trainings and other resources. Thank you again for being here, and we'll talk to you guys next time.